Where were you last night when Missouri was leading Georgia in the fourth quarter? Georgia ends up winning this 26-22 with 9:39 left to go in regulation. That was the moment that Georgia first found the end zone. Now, what if I gave you odds on that? What if I gave you that little prop bet? I was caught completely by surprise. I mean, remember where we were, guys. Georgia had a struggle win against Kent State, which means they are going to go and annihilate whoever they play next, right? Meanwhile, Missouri has the most heartbreaking loss imaginable the week before, which is going to crush their spirit, right? And then there they are against Georgia last night, leading in the fourth quarter. If you were watching this, and I got all the way back to Nashville by 7 o'clock last night. I was in our office watching all the late games. You were probably thinking like I was, when is the burst coming? You know it's coming. This is going to be a really good story that Missouri led this thing through three quarters, but Georgia ends up pulling away. That's the way that game's supposed to happen. And the burst never came. And in retrospect, it's fair to ask yourself, where was the burst going to come from? It wasn't going to come from the running back position. Georgia, by their standards, is pretty average there this year. It wasn't going to come from the wide receiver room. Georgia does not have special talent in that room. They don't have the ability to be explosive. They don't have elite athleticism in that room this year. And as a result, you don't have a quarterback that can take over a game. Now, here's what they do have. Because I think Georgia right now is about to get played the same way Clemson did last year. When folks realized Clemson just had a bunch of guys who looked impressive but couldn't beat you at wide receiver, they played Clemson differently. I think folks are going to play Georgia that way. Here's the difference. Georgia's got a tight end room that can still take over games. They got a tight end room that's full of some of the best players in the country. But they're going to get played different. And that kind of goes back to that week one deal where they just blow out Oregon. And I told you it reminded me potentially of the same thing last year that Bama did to Miami. Bama blows Miami out early in 2021, and everyone says that team's unbeatable. They're going to have a death march to the national title. Well, they weren't unbeatable. And they didn't have a death march to the national title. In fact, they almost got beat several times on the road. They did get beat one time on the road. They were good enough to win any game they played, but they weren't invincible. Georgia this year just destroyed Oregon in week one. And now you've seen them a few times look vulnerable. And you got to ask yourself, if you drew conclusions in week one, did you violate one of Meemaw's principles? A foolish man concludes in week one. A wise man observes in week one. There were a lot of flaws with this team you just didn't see in week one. Now, here's the plus side. They're still good enough to win a national championship. This was never going to be a flawless team. And the whole defending champion thing, there's a reason I don't use that phrasing on the show. This team hadn't won anything. There are a lot of players on this team that had very little, if anything, to do with that championship last year. And the ones who did are in new circumstances themselves this year. I don't think this is a deal that has to do anything with complacency. I don't get that sense from them. If you've got new pieces, if you've got younger guys, just because they're not playing maybe at the same level or with quite the same intensity as the version you saw last year doesn't automatically mean it's complacency. That's just natural. Those are the kind of growing pains that you get from human beings, period, regardless of whether they're playing for a logo on their helmet that did something last year or not. So the observation that people made in week one, in retrospect, probably got blown up a little bit too much. Now, I get it. It's hard to watch what Georgia did to Oregon in week one and not be ultra impressed by it. But now we start to learn what Georgia really is. And this is where you got to get to work. If you're Kirby Smart and his staff, you got to get to work now. You're still better than every team they're going to play on their schedule, but you start to realize, all right, if a team pops us early, I can't help but think down the road about when they play Tennessee, only because it's the most dangerous passing attack they'll play all year. I can't help but think about what happens if that team gets up, 13, 17 to 3 or something like that. Because it may not be as easy, because you may not be able to just make them sit still while you slowly reel them in like you did in Missouri last night. The point is, look, losing a game is not the end of the world. We've seen teams lose games and win national championships. But this Georgia team is going to be a lot more work in progress. I get the sense that there are some younger guys on this team that you may have sparingly seen so far that you're going to end up seeing more and more, because here's what Kirby Smart's not going to do. What Kirby Smart's not going to do is just keep the same guys in the same positions for the sake of seniority and blah, blah, blah. They have some of the most incredible practices you could ever imagine. Some of the most high-level competition in America is happening Monday through Thursday in Athens, Georgia. And it may very well be that some of those young guys they have on campus, because they're not getting the result, they're not playing to the standard they want to, it may be that those guys get more shots and get more playing time down the road. It happens every year there. It just may happen a little more abundantly this year. But they got some good players there. They got some great players there potentially. It's not a great team at the moment, but understand the scale we're talking about here. That's still one of the 3 best teams in the country. And you're watching them yesterday. If you're a Georgia fan, you're finding every reason to knock what you're watching. Just goes to show you the kind of rarefied air you're in as a program when, your struggle is the envy of most of the rest of the country. 26-22 against Missouri. I did not see it coming. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't leave yet. Don't leave yet. Make sure you like the video and please subscribe to the channel. Not just for me. That's how we keep this entire thing free.